My wife's emergency C-section started an hour before my mother's final chemo treatment, and I had to choose between one of them. Mira's water broke at 4 in the morning in our hallway, and by the time we got to the hospital, her blood pressure had dropped so fast the nurse stopped writing things down and started shouting them down the hall. A doctor I had never seen before told me they were taking her into surgery in 10 minutes and that I needed to sign 3 forms. I signed them without reading. My hand was shaking so hard the pen slipped twice. My phone rang while I was waiting for the elevator. It was my mother. "You're 40 minutes late," she said. "The infusion is at 8. I told her Mira was being wheeled into an operating room. I told her the doctor said unstable, said hemorrhage, said the baby was too early." My mother was quiet for 2 seconds. Then she said, "Then come straight here after." I told her I had no idea how long any of this would be. She said, "Today is the most important day of my life. We have been planning it for 8 months. Then she hung up. My mother's last chemo had become a project the September before. She had a cake ordered, a photographer booked, my sister Dana flying in from Seattle, my aunts driving down from Buffalo, a sign that said she beat it, and a written list of who would stand where in the photograph. My dad had told me twice that I was on the list at the front, next to her. Mira had been pregnant the entire time. Mira had thrown up every morning for 6 months. Mira had been on bed rest for the 3 weeks before her water broke. My mother had not once asked how she was feeling. When I told her about the bed rest in October, she said, "I had 4 children, and I worked until each one came out. Girls today make a meal out of nothing." When Mira's own mother flew in from Tampa to help us, my mother told my aunt at Thanksgiving that Mira's family was taking over. At our baby shower in January, my mother told Mira in front of everyone that she was carrying too low and would probably need a C-section anyway, then left after 20 minutes because she did not like the cake flavor. Mira cried in the car on the way home. So when my mother told me on the phone that today was the most important day of her life, I already knew which day she meant and which day she did not. I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours. My phone would not stop lighting up. Texts from my sister, texts from my aunts, voicemails from my mother, each one louder than the last. Dana wrote, "You need to be here. She is crying. You are breaking her heart." My aunt wrote, "Your mother has cancer. Whatever Mira is dealing with can wait." I read that one twice. I did not answer any of them. At 11:14, a doctor came out and told me Mira was going to live. The baby was in the NICU. A girl, 3 pounds 11 ounces, breathing on her own. I held my daughter through a plastic glove inside an incubator before I held my wife. I did not call my mother. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house with a printed photo of my daughter in my pocket. My mother would not open the door. My father came out onto the porch and told me to give her time. He told me she had finished the chemo and was taking it hard. I told him Mira had nearly died. He said he knew. I asked him if I could come in. He said maybe in a few days. I left the photo in their mailbox and drove back to the hospital. By that night, my mother had told the entire family that I had chosen Mira's family over hers on the most important day of her life. She told them Mira's labor had not actually been that bad. She told them I was punishing her for getting sick. Dana stopped answering my texts. 2 cousins unfollowed me. My other aunt sent me a long message about how disappointed she was. My mother sent me one message that week. It said, "I will never forgive you for this." Mira read it over my shoulder in the NICU and started to cry. And then she apologized for crying. She said she was sorry for making things harder. My wife, 6 staples in her stomach and 3 days without sleep, an IV still in her arm, was sorry for being upset about a text from my mother. That was the part that broke me, not the message. I did nothing. I did not write a long message explaining what happened in that operating room. I brought my daughter home 4 weeks later, and I sent my dad a photo every Sunday, and I did not put my mother on the text. He showed her anyway. 6 months later, my father called me from his cardiologist's parking lot and asked me to come over that night without Mira. He said my mother had pushed it too far at Sunday dinner, telling Dana that Mira had faked the severity of her surgery to embarrass the family on her big day. He said something had moved in him when she said it, something he could not put back and did not want to. He said he had spent the afternoon in the attic going through the boxes from the chemo party my mother had refused to throw away, and he had found something devastating. I told Mira I was going. She grabbed my wrist and said to be careful, that his family had a way of pulling me back in just to hurt me again. I kissed Isabel on her forehead and drove over. Zephyrus was sitting on the front steps when I pulled in, like he had been waiting there a while. He stood up when I got out of the car, and I almost stopped walking. He looked old, not just tired. Old in a way I had not seen before. His face was thinner. His shoulders were rounded forward like he was carrying something heavy across his back. He had aged 5 years since the last time I had seen him, only a couple months ago. He did not say hello. He did not ask about Mira or Isabel. He opened the front door and said, "She's at a friend's house. We have about 2 hours. Come upstairs." I followed him through the hallway and past the dining room and up the narrow staircase, then up the pull-down ladder into the attic. I had not been up there since I was a teenager. It still smelled like old wood and dust. Zephyrus walked straight to the far corner where a group of boxes were sitting separate from the rest, like he had already pulled them out and gone through them. The box at the top had Celebration Day written on the side in thick black marker. I knew the handwriting. It was Madeline's. He pulled out the streamers and the banner that said, "She beat it" in pink and gold letters, and the photo lineup printed on cardstock with my name written at the front next to hers. Underneath all of it, at the very bottom, he reached in and pulled out a spiral notebook. Blue cover, the kind you get at any dollar store. He held it out to me. I found this under the cake topper box. Read the 3rd page. I flipped past 2 pages of grocery lists and a phone number scribbled in the corner. On the 3rd page, the handwriting was neat, careful, organized. At the top, in capital letters, she had written, "If he doesn't come." Underneath was a list. Not a messy, emotional scribbled list. A planned one. Bullet points clean and straight. Each one a separate instruction. The first section was labeled Dana, and underneath it said, "Tell her he did not even call, and say Mira's family convinced him to stay away." The next section was for my aunts. Under Catherine's name, remind her about Thanksgiving, how Mira's mother was already taking over. Under Adelia's name, tell her he has been pulling away since the wedding, that Mira's family has been pushing him. There was a section near the bottom that made my hands go cold. It said, "Do not mention the details of her labor. Keep it vague. Say she was fine." I read that line 3 times. Then I looked at the top of the page again, at the part I had skipped over because I was so focused on the list itself. There was a date, written small in the upper right corner, the way Madeline always dated her lists and her grocery notes. 2 days before Mira's water broke. 2 days before the emergency. 2 days before any of it happened. I I could not make my brain catch up to what my eyes were reading. She wrote this before. She wrote this before Mira went into labor. She wrote this before the C-section, before the hemorrhage, before Isabel, before any of it. My mother had sat down at some point 2 days before the worst morning of my life, and she had already decided that I might not come to her celebration. And instead of calling me, instead of asking what was going on with Mira, she wrote a plan. She wrote a script for every family member so that if I did not show up, she could turn every single one of them against me before I had a chance to explain. She had not reacted to what happened on that Friday. She had executed something she had already built. Zephyrus was sitting on an old trunk against the wall, his hands on his knees. He said, I spent 32 years thinking she was difficult. This is not difficult. This is organized. Then he told me about the cardiologist. His blood pressure had been dangerously high for 3 months. The doctor had been clear about it. Either remove the source of stress or start on medication for the rest of his life. He said the doctor asked him what was causing so much pressure, and he could not even get through the explanation without his readings going up right there in the office. He looked at me, and his eyes were wet, and he said, you are not the only one she is killing. I stood there holding that notebook in my mother's handwriting, in my parents' attic, looking at my father who had spent 32 years trying to keep peace with a woman who kept war plans and a box of party decorations. Every cousin who unfollowed me, every aunt who sent a disappointed message, every silence from Dana, all of it traced back to this page. She had scripted the whole thing. I called Dana that night from my counter while Mira was putting Isabel down. She picked up flat. I don't really have anything to say to you. I told her I needed 15 minutes on a video call. She said mom told her I would call and try to manipulate her. I said, did mom also tell you what to say right now? Because she wrote that down too. The line went silent. Not the kind of silence where someone is thinking, the kind where the air changes. She said, what does that mean? I propped my phone on the counter and held the notebook to the camera, open to the 3rd page. I watched her eyes move across it, left to right, then start over from the top like she was making sure she had read it correctly. Her arms uncrossed. She leaned forward. She said, where did you get that? I told her. She said it could be from after, that Madeline could have written it later just to get her thoughts together. I pointed to the date. I watched her lean in. I watched her lips move as she read the small numbers in the upper corner. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, even if she wrote that, she had cancer. People plan for the worst. I told her to read the line about Mira's labor, the one that said, keep it vague, the one that said she was fine. I asked her if she had ever looked up what an emergency C-section at 33 weeks actually looks like. Her mouth opened a little. Nothing came out. So I told her. I told her about the 2nd surgical team. I told her about the 6 staples. I told her about Mira lying in that bed with an IV in her arm apologizing for crying. Dana was crying before I finished. She was not trying to hide it. Her chin was doing that thing it used to do when we were kids, and she was trying not to break down. She said, why didn't you tell me this before? I said, because you stopped answering my texts. She closed her eyes. She said, I believe you, but I can't say anything to mom. She just finished cancer. If something happens to her health, I will never forgive myself. That was when I understood. Madeline had not just lied. She had built a cage out of her own illness, and Dana was inside it. Dana's last words before she hung up were, give me time. My father had said the same words to me 6 months ago on the front porch while my daughter's photo sat in his mailbox. Time was what Madeline used. Time was the tool. I was done giving it to her. I called Zephyrus that same hour. I told him I wanted Catherine and Adelia at my house Saturday, the two who had spread Madeline's version the hardest. If they saw the notebook, the network collapsed. He said he would make the calls. Saturday, Gail came over early to help with Isabel. I told her I needed her to stay. You were there when Mira almost died. They need to hear it from someone who is not me. She looked down at Isabel for a second, then back up at me. She said, I will not raise my voice, but I will not lie either. Catherine and Adelia came in the same car. Catherine hugged Zephyrus first and barely looked at me. Adelia walked past Mira like she was furniture. I saw Mira's face tighten before she turned and took Isabel into the back room. We sat down. The food was on the table. Nobody reached for it. Catherine smoothed her napkin and said, your father said this was important. I hope this isn't about relitigating what happened. Your mother has been through enough. I said, I agree. She has put everyone through enough. I placed the notebook on the table, opened to the 3rd page, and did not say anything. I did not explain what it was. I just let it sit there. Catherine read first. She pulled it closer slowly, like she was not sure she was supposed to touch it. Her jaw shifted, barely. She slid the notebook to Adelia without a word. Adelia read slower. Her lips moved a little as she went through the bullet points. She got to the bottom and looked up at Zephyrus. Where did you find this? He said, in the box with the party decoration. She kept it like a trophy. Catherine tried first. Madeline was scared. She had cancer. I said, read the date. She leaned in, found the small numbers. Her mouth opened slightly. Not a lot, just enough that I could see the moment she understood. This is from before the birth. I nodded. She planned to turn you against me before Mira even went into labor. Then Gail spoke. She had been sitting at the end of the table the whole time, hands folded, not moving. When she started talking, her voice was calm and even. The kind of calm that does not come from being relaxed, but from having already gone through the worst of something. She told them she had been the first one at the hospital that morning. She told them what Mira looked like when they were prepping her for surgery. Gray, not pale, not tired looking. Gray, like the color was leaving her body in real time. She told them about the 2nd surgical team coming in fast, and nobody explaining why until afterward, when a doctor told her Mira had lost more blood than they expected. She told them about me signing forms while my phone kept ringing, over and over. She said she could hear it from down the hall. Then she said, I have been a mother for 31 years. If my daughter's husband had left that hospital to go to a party, I would have never spoken to him again. Catherine looked down at the table. Adelia sat very still, then said quietly, she told us Mira's labor was routine. She said the baby was fine from the start. I said, Isabel was 3 pounds 11 ounces. She was in the NICU for 4 weeks. Does that sound routine to you? Catherine's hand was on the edge of the table, and I could see it shaking. Then a sound came out of her she clearly did not want to make. Her shoulders started moving and she pressed her fingers against her eyes and she was crying. Not loud, just a woman sitting at a table realizing she had been used as a weapon against her own nephew. She said, I sent you that message. I told you Mira's situation could wait. I said, I know. I read it twice. Catherine said she would come to a family gathering. Adelia nodded and said she would too. Zephyrus said he would get Madeline there. The gathering was the following weekend at my parents' house. The drive over felt longer than it was. Mira sat sat in the passenger seat pressing her thumb into her other palm, which is something she does when she is nervous and trying not to show it. Gail followed in her own car. Dana was already there when we walked in. She was standing near the window with her arms crossed, and when she saw me, she uncrossed them and came over. She did not say anything. She just put her arms around me and held on. It was brief. It was the first time my sister had touched me in 6 months. Madeline came down the stairs and stopped 3 steps from the bottom when she saw the room. Me, Mira, Isabel, Gail, Dana, Catherine, Adelia, Zephyrus by the dining room doorway. Her expression tightened like a fist closing. She looked at Zephyrus. "What is this?" He said. "A family dinner. Sit down, Madeline." Her eyes landed on Gail. Her jaw set hard. "Why is she here? This is my house." Gail did not move. I said, "She is here because she was in the hospital the day you were not. Sit down, Mom." Madeline came down and sat at the head of the table. For a while, it almost felt okay. People passed dishes. Madeline asked Dana about her job. Adelia complimented the food. Then Madeline looked at Mira and asked if she could hold Isabel. Mira looked at me. I nodded. Mira walked around the table and placed Isabel carefully into Madeline's arms. My mother held my daughter for the first time. She tucked the blanket around Isabel's feet and looked down at her face with an expression I had not seen in a long time. Soft, real. Something opened up in my chest I did not want to feel. Warm and painful at the same time. I thought maybe this could work. Maybe the notebook could stay where it was. Then Madeline handed Isabel back, straightened up, looked around the table and said, "I'm glad we can finally move past all of this. I know the last few months were hard on everyone, especially me, but I forgive you all for how you handled my celebration." The warm thing in my chest turned to ice so fast it felt like something cracked. She was forgiving us. Sitting at the head of her table, surrounded by every person she had lied to, she was forgiving us. Catherine looked at Adelia. Adelia looked back, and neither said a word, but I could see it on both of their faces. Dana stared at her plate. The room was perfectly still. Then Zephyrus reached behind him to the cabinet with the glass doors where Madeline kept her good dishes, and he pulled out the notebook. He placed it in the center of the table. He said, "Then explain this." Madeline picked it up slowly. She flipped through it page by page, the way someone reviews a document at work. She closed it and set it down and said, "This was private." 2 words. That was her defense. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I can explain." Zephyrus leaned forward. "It stopped being private when you used it to turn our children against each other." Her head snapped toward him so fast I saw her neck tense. "You went through my things," he said. "I went through our attic, and I found out my wife had a playbook for destroying our son's marriage." She turned to me. Her voice was smooth, measured, almost rehearsed. "I had cancer. I was dying, and you chose her over me." I held Mira's hand under the table. I said, "You were not dying. Your oncologist told Dad in September that your prognosis was excellent. Mira was dying. The doctors told me they almost lost her twice on the table. You knew that. You wrote in your notebook not to mention it." Her eyes flicked to Catherine, checking if the troops were still in line. Catherine did not look up. Dana said, "Mom, you called me the night of your chemo and told me Mira had a normal delivery and that he just didn't want to come. I flew across the country for you. I stopped talking to my brother for 6 months because of what you told me." Madeline said, "I told you what I believed." Dana shook her head. "You told me what you wrote down 2 days before it happened. You didn't believe it. You planned it." Madeline opened her mouth. Nothing came out. It was the first time in my life I had seen my mother without a response ready. She always had something. She always had a way to turn it back around. But in that room, with her own handwriting sitting on the table, she had nothing. Adelia stood up. She pulled out her phone and read the text she had sent me 6 months ago, word for word. "Your mother has cancer. Whatever Mira is dealing with can wait." She put the phone down. The sound it made on the wood was small and final. "I said that to my nephew about his wife who almost bled out on an operating table. I am ashamed of myself, and I am furious with you." Catherine nodded. It was small, but it was real, and Madeline saw it. Adelia said she would call Felipe tonight. She would call Alyssa too. Madeline stood up. She looked around the table at every face and nobody met her eyes. She turned to Zephyrus last. "After everything I went through, you are all going to sit here and make me the villain?" He stood. He held the notebook in front of her, close enough that she could see her own handwriting. "You made yourself the villain, Madeline. You just didn't think anyone would find the script." She grabbed her coat off the back of her chair and walked toward the front door. She stopped in the hallway and turned back and looked at me. "You will regret this." I stood up with Isabel against my chest, one hand under her, one hand on her back. I could feel her heartbeat through the blanket, small and fast and steady. I said, "No, Mom, I won't. I already have my regret. It was every day I stayed quiet and let you do this to my family." She walked out. The door closed with a quiet click. Nobody followed her. Dana put her arms around me and Isabel and whispered she was sorry. Zephyrus sat down and put his head in his hands. Mira's tears were falling without sound. Gail had her hand on Mira's shoulder. Catherine was staring at the table with red eyes. Adelia was sitting straight in her chair, jaw set, already thinking about the calls. The house was quiet. Isabel was asleep against my chest. Mira's hand was still in mine. Nobody got up.